She came with a killer's touch and a flawless cover, a foreign assassin sent to charm and poison President Ibrahim Traoré at the height of global tensions. But just as the plan neared perfection, one twist shattered everything. In a moment of chilling vulnerability, an unexpected betrayal didn't come from Traoré, it came from within the assassin's own circle. Now caught between deadly loyalty and human weakness, the lines blur. Was this about power or survival? And in a world of deception, can loyalty ever be real? Get ready on Courageous Voices for a story that will leave you questioning everything. The plane touched down just after midnight, cloaked by the heavy Ouagadougou heat that never quite sleeps. Vera Rostova stepped onto the tarmac with the grace of royalty and the eyes of a predator. Her passport identified her as a cultural envoy from a respected Eastern European nation, but that was only a sliver of truth. Behind the silk blouse and warm smiles hid years of brutal training, political manipulation, and kills so clean they became legends whispered in intelligence circles. Burkina Faso was unfamiliar ground to her, yet her purpose was crystal clear. Her handlers, a ruthless rogue faction back home, had painted Traoré as the last obstacle standing in the way of a lucrative new regime. She moved like water through the diplomatic corps. By day, she attended art shows, charity galas, and economic forums, always wearing understated elegance. By night, encrypted messages lit up her burner phones with precise updates. The team was already in place: paid informants, a corrupt security insider, and a whisper-thin thread connected directly to the assassin sponsor's headquarters. Within days, Vera was no longer a stranger. Ministers shook her hand, aides laughed at her jokes, and even Traoré's closest advisors admired her grace. She studied them all, quietly mapping the pathways to the man himself. Traoré rarely trusted foreigners, yet Vera's reputation for kindness and intelligence seemed to erode that wall one careful brick at a time. And still, behind those mesmerizing eyes, something colder stirred. Failure was not in her contract. One dinner, one sip, one silent ending, that was the mission. Yet, as she stared out at the sleeping city from her luxury hotel, a strange heaviness lingered in her chest. For all her precision, even Vera couldn't script how this story would end. Could this be the moment everything changes? Stay tuned on Courageous Voices to find out. The corridors of Kosiam Palace were quieter than they had ever been. Guards stood rigid at their posts, yet inside the air hung heavy with unease. President Ibrahim Traoré sat alone in his office long after midnight, the glow of a single desk lamp casting harsh shadows across stacks of classified reports. Maps of Africa sprawled before him, littered with markings and notes, alliances shifting like desert sands, threats coded in diplomatic language and whispers of plots he could no longer ignore. Outwardly, Traoré remained the symbol of resilience. To the people, he was the protector who stood firm when others bowed to foreign pressures. His speeches ignited hope, his military reforms brought order, and his vision for Burkina Faso had rallied nations across West Africa. But power, he knew too well, came with invisible scars. Lately, the scars felt deeper. Trusted aides now hesitated before speaking, foreign ambassadors smiled too wide, even regional allies offered gestures that felt rehearsed. Each night as the palace grew still, Traoré wrestled alone with the question that haunted him: who among them wore masks? He rarely left his chambers without reason. Meals were often taken in solitude. Meetings, when necessary, remained guarded in brief. Despite the warmth he projected in public, Traoré lived in constant vigilance, acutely aware that betrayal rarely arrived with a warning, yet fatigue was creeping in. On this particular night, he leaned back, closing his eyes briefly as his fingers pressed against his temples. For all his training and discipline, loneliness was an enemy he had never truly prepared for. Somewhere in the dark, another player was moving closer, threading charm and venom together like silk, but even Traoré, hardened by war and politics, could not see Vera Rostova coming, not yet. The night was flawless, wrapped in golden lights and murmured promises of unity. The diplomatic gala at Wagga 2000 Conference Center attracted dignitaries from across the continent. Beneath the chandeliers and string quartet melodies, Vera Rostova moved gracefully, every gesture calculated yet effortless. Her dress shimmered subtly, a quiet statement in a room full of louder egos. She navigated with precision, slipping from conversations about trade to soft debates about security, always listening, always watching. When Traoré entered, the room shifted, conversations lowered, eyes turned. He was magnetic without trying, dressed modestly, but carrying the undeniable weight of a man who knew everyone present had layered intentions. Vera timed her approach carefully, a clumsy waiter, a spilled glass near his path, all orchestrated. She stepped in smoothly, dabbing his sleeve with a napkin before offering a radiant, disarming smile. President Traoré, allow me to apologize, foreign clumsiness, I fear, she said softly, her accent adding a curious charm. He studied her, not rudely, but carefully. Experience had taught him beauty often masked deeper agendas, still her poise intrigued him. They exchanged pleasantries, each sentence a delicate dance. By evening's end, she hadn't pushed. That was the genius. Traoré left curious, not cautious. Over the next week, fate seemed to favor Vera. Introductions came through trusted aides charmed by her wit and apparent sincerity. An invite to an economic panel, a casual lunch with ministers, a walk through the National Archives. Traoré noticed, but not alarmingly so. She never overstepped, she simply appeared. By the time she was offered a private tour of Kosiam Palace's gardens, even Traoré's chief advisor remarked how refreshing her insight seemed. The seed was planted, and Vera knew soon the harvest would come. In the shadows behind Vera's poised exterior, a ruthless machine had already begun to hum. Every mission of this scale demanded precision, and hers was no exception. Weeks before she even landed, operatives had been embedded and bribed, their loyalty bought with promises of wealth and whispers of political reshuffling. The security chief, Colonel de Beer, had once been a rising star until Traoré's reforms crushed his corrupt ambitions. Bitter and sidelined, he was easy to turn with quiet authority. He manipulated guard rotations and blind spots, ensuring that when the time came, no prying eyes would disrupt the plan. In Côte d'Ivoire, an exiled Burkinabe tycoon named Silas Kawanda pulled strings from afar. Once a beloved industrialist, he now seated in luxury exile. After Traoré's crackdown on illicit mining shattered his empire through encrypted calls and secret wire transfers, Silas became the financier and coordinator, turning his bitterness into fuel. But the most dangerous thread in Vera's web was Daniel Mensah, a UN attaché whose charming smile concealed cold ambition. His loyalty was not to nations, but to Vera's enigmatic sponsor, a rogue faction in her homeland desperate to destabilize West Africa's rising leaders. Daniel, embedded within international diplomacy, provided access others couldn't: surveillance gaps, diplomatic cover, and crucially, the rare dinner invitation. Together, they crafted the perfect storm. The poison, a tasteless neurotoxin refined to mimic natural causes, was procured through Silas's dark market ties. It would be laced into Traoré's wine during what was meant to be an intimate, relaxed evening away from state pressures. As the final confirmations clicked into place, Vera felt the weight of inevitability settle over her. The trap was flawless, no alarms, no suspects. Traoré wouldn't know he'd been targeted until it was far too late, or so they believed. Is this the turning point you've been waiting for? Keep watching on Courageous Voices. The night unfolded like something out of a dream, or perhaps the prelude to a nightmare. Kosiam Palace's private gardens shimmered beneath soft lantern light as insects hummed lazily in the warm air. President Traoré had insisted on something informal: no grand halls, no formal attire, just two people shielded by carefully distracted security, sharing a simple meal under the stars. For Vera, This was perfect. She had played her part flawlessly up to this point, effortlessly charming, subtly deferential, never too eager. As the first course was cleared, a silver tray carrying the wineglasses appeared. She recognized the signal. The moment was set. The toxin would dissolve instantly, undetectable, lethal only hours later when his defenses would be lowest. Yet, as Traoré poured her a glass first, then his own, the assassin in Vera wavered for the briefest second. He did not speak like the tyrants and puppets she was used to eliminating. Instead, his words cut strangely deep. They shake our hands, smile for the cameras, Traoré murmured, his eyes distant, and yet behind doors. They buy our leaders, pit us against each other, steal our children's futures. Betrayal wears a suit now, not a soldier's uniform. Vera swirled her wine, masking the sudden tightness in her throat. This wasn't strategic posturing, it was personal. Traoré wasn't merely protecting power, he was carrying the weight of a continent betrayed too many times. The assassin's mask slipped just slightly, her laughter grew quieter, her questions softer, more curious. As dessert arrived, she realized she had delayed the fatal toast without even noticing. For the first time in her career, Vera hesitated. The target had become human. The poison remained untouched between them, yet the night itself had already become dangerous in a way no mission dossier could predict. As the dinner stretched into the late hours, something unspoken hung in the air. Vera's composure was intact, yet to Daniel Mensah, watching from afar under the guise of diplomatic duty, something had changed. He had known Vera as ruthless, surgically precise, always 2 moves ahead, but tonight, through the whispers on the security feed and glances exchanged between her and Traoré, he saw hesitation, a flicker of something disturbingly human. Daniel had not planned for this. Falling for Vera had never been part of his orders. Their alliance had always been transactional, bound by shared ambition and shadowy sponsors, but over weeks of coded messages and midnight strategy meetings, admiration had crept in quietly. He saw past her killer's mask, or thought he did. Now, as she stalled the fatal moment, doubt poisoned his resolve. Watching her speak softly to Traoré, listening to the president's raw words about betrayal and hope, Daniel's world twisted. Could he allow this? Was this still politics, or had it become murder in its most cowardly form? The decision cracked through him faster than he expected. Moving swiftly yet discreetly, Daniel slipped away from the diplomatic contingent, down guarded corridors and through secure lines. He contacted Palace Intelligence using an alias known only to a few. The message was simple but explosive: assassination attempt imminent. Source: close diplomatic circle. Verify now. As guards quietly repositioned, Daniel returned to his post, face unreadable. He knew his betrayal would destroy everything: his career, his sponsors' trust, perhaps even Vera herself. But in that instant, calculation gave way to conscience. Some betrayals are selfish, others are born from love and fear. Daniel's was both, and as the clock ticked down, he knew there was no turning back. The garden's serenity shattered in an instant. Heavy boots crunched against gravel as Traoré's presidential guard stormed the scene, rifles raised, eyes hard with purpose. Lanterns swung violently in the sudden chaos, their soft glow replaced by the harsh beams of tactical flashlights. Vera barely had time to rise from her chair before cold steel pressed against her temple. "Don't move," one of the commanders barked, his voice devoid of mercy. Traoré, though visibly stunned, stayed seated. He raised a hand calmly, his voice cutting through the tension with quiet authority. "No blood," he ordered firmly. "Not yet." Vera's pulse roared in her ears, her training screamed for action, to disarm, to run, to vanish, but she did nothing, not because she couldn't, because she was blindsided. How had they known? She glanced at her untouched wine, at the plan that was supposed to unfold seamlessly. Then came the deeper betrayal. Daniel stepped forward, emerging from behind the perimeter of guards. His eyes didn't hold malice, only something far crueler in that moment: pity. He didn't lower his gaze as he spoke plainly in front of Traoré. "Vera, and the stunned officials now arriving, I leaked it," he confessed quietly. She faltered. "It wasn't supposed to be this way." Vera's breath caught, betrayed not by the enemy, but by her own By the man who had walked every shadowed step with her. The sting wasn't from the rifles or the shackles soon to bind her wrists, it was the devastation that came with realizing trust, even twisted as theirs was, had fractured. Traoré stood slowly, surveying her, not with rage, but with something harder to bear, disappointment. You had every advantage, he said softly, yet you lost to something you thought didn't exist in you, mercy. The silence in the bunker was unlike the night's chaos. Thick walls swallowed every sound except for the slow, deliberate breaths of two people seated across from each other, predator and prey. Though neither fit the roles anymore, Vera sat cuffed, stripped of elegance, her face bare of makeup and pretense. The killer was gone, only the woman remained. Traoré leaned forward, eyes sharp but weary. Why? He asked, voice low. Absent of accusation, you had access, you could have ended me without hesitation. What stopped you? Vera's lips parted, but no venom emerged. Instead, her shoulders sagged, and for the first time in years, tears welled in her eyes. The admission came slowly, like poison she could no longer contain. They have my sister, she whispered, voice cracking, and my mother back home. If I failed, they promised it would be slow, not just death. Suffering. I had no choice. Traoré listened without interruption. The icy assassin now spoke like someone utterly human, terrified, fractured, exhausted. She explained everything. The rogue faction, desperate for leverage in Africa, had used her family as chains. They trained her, molded her into a ghost of death, then yanked the leash when Burkina Faso's independence became inconvenient. When she faltered at dinner, it wasn't weakness, she confessed, it was because Traoré's words had pierced him. He spoke of enemies disguised as friends, and suddenly she saw herself. Traoré's expression tightened, caught between rage and reluctant compassion. He had prepared for killers and coups, but not for this. Vera was no martyr, yet neither was she evil. In this small, suffocating room, the lines blurred. The burden of judgment now sat heavy on his shoulders, and in his silence, even Vera knew forgiveness might be more painful than punishment. Dawn crept silently over Ouagadougou as Traoré sat alone, weighing a decision few would understand. Advisors had already filled his ears with warnings. She must face justice, it will show weakness, others will try the same. Yet beneath the heavy veil of politics, something nodded at him. He had seen killers before, ruthless, ideological, fanatical. Vera was none of these. She was a weapon made by desperation. Later that morning, inside the bunker now cleared of guards, Traoré stood before her once more. Vera looked different now, no longer defiant, no longer broken, simply resigned. Whatever fate he chose, she seemed ready to meet it. I should sign your death, Traoré began quietly, his voice carrying the weight of nations. My people expect blood, my enemies expect silence. But both would be too easy. You are more valuable alive to me, to justice and to the truth. Her eyes, rimmed with fatigue and tears, lifted slowly, confusion warred with disbelief. I offer you a choice, Traoré continued. Stepping closer, expose your sponsors, name every name, reveal every hand that pushed this blade toward Burkina Faso's throat. Do this and you will have protection, asylum, a chance, however fragile, to live without fear. Vera's lips trembled. For so long, she had accepted death as the only exit from her life's cruel contract. Mercy had never been offered nor expected, yet here it stood, dangerous, fragile, and terrifying. Her answer came without theatrics. She nodded, voice barely audible. I'll do it. In that moment, something shifted. Traoré had not spared a life, he had gambled with it and with global politics. As they shook hands silently, both knew the real storm had just begun, and neither would sleep peacefully again. Weeks slipped by, but the scars of that night did not fade. News of the foiled assassination roared through diplomatic channels like wildfire. Accusations and denials flew between capitals while reporters circled like vultures, desperate for a statement. Traoré, however, offered them none. His silence became both shield and sword. He refused to give his enemies the satisfaction of knowing whether he had emerged stronger or haunted. Vera Rostova, now stripped of her aliases and mission, disappeared into the world's hidden corners. Those who once pulled her strings were named, shamed, and quietly erased in the brutal efficiency of international justice. Her testimony, taken behind closed doors, shattered powerful networks and destabilized shadow regimes, yet to the world, she became a ghost, neither hero nor villain, simply gone. Inside Kosem Palace, life returned to form, yet something invisible had changed. The laughter in meetings grew more guarded, handshakes lingered a second too long as people searched each other's eyes. Traoré, once an open book to his closest allies, became an unreadable page. Trust, he realized, was now his rarest resource. Late one night, alone in his office, he stood by the tall window overlooking the sleeping city. The lights flickered softly, distant and indifferent. His reflection stared back at him, proud, unbroken, but undeniably altered. He spoke aloud, though only the darkness answered. When the trusted are threats, who remains true? The words hung there, heavier than any official decree. There would be other assassins, other betrayals, the faces would change, but the game would remain. As Traoré turned away, the world outside stayed still, but in the corners unseen, shadows watched and waited, proving that victory in this world was never truly final. What will happen next in this deadly game? Stay with Courageous Voices to uncover the truth. If this story gripped you, don't stop here. Hit that subscribe button for more untold truths, hidden betrayals, and real-world power plays that the media won't show you. Smash the like button if you believe loyalty still matters in a world full of shadows. Comment below, do you think Traoré made the right choice by sparing her? Was mercy a strength or a dangerous gamble? Let's talk on Courageous Voices.